Hi, everyone. Everyone's still sitting up after this long day. Thanks again for coming. It's been a pleasure seeing everyone throughout this day, engaging and talking and enjoying the different sessions. We wanted to dedicate this session to the intersection between entrepreneurship and serverless and startups and just talk about serverless in general. As I said, my name is Avner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Binaris. And with me, you've met Amir this morning. And we have Dudu from Lightspeed. And what we really want to do here is do something that's a little bit more interactive and incorporate you as much as possible. So we're going to start off with a few questions that I הכינותי לי מראש. And then we'll just open it up. And just to make everyone comfortable, if you want to ask the question in Hebrew, we'll translate it. So just don't let the language barrier be in the way. Maybe start off with just quick introductions.
So as Avner said, my name is David Gussarsky, nickname Dudu in Hebrew. It doesn't work that well in English. So I'm a partner with Lightspeed. Lightspeed is one of the leading funds in the Valley. We're managing more than $5 billion, investing now out of Fund 11, which is a $1.2 billion fund, mainly focusing on early stage investment in IT, the very, very broad definition of IT, and also doing digital health. Again, strong focus on early stage. We have a seed program, 15 partners in Menlo Park. We're 3 partners in Israel. And as opposed to some of the foreign funds that work in Israel, we're a bit different. We're investing out of the main fund across the different states, which is mainly today US and Israel. We do have sister funds in India and China with around $300 million in each fund. So that's Lightspeed in general. With regard to Lightspeed in Israel, we started to invest in Israel in 1994 from remote. We opened an office in Israel in 2006. And I joined in 2008, so I'm 10 years with Lightspeed since this month. And previously I was with an Israeli fund called BRM, started there as an associate principal and later a partner. So overall I'm with the venture industry since August 2000.
Hi everyone, I've been introduced 3 times, so if you don't remember me, then we have a problem. So I run the developer platform on Twitch.
Right. So maybe let's start with a developer experience. And first question is for Amir. And how do you? So you kind of touched upon that in your keynote, but how do you think about the difference in developer experience between PaaS platforms like Docker-oriented tools, Kubernetes tools versus serverless?
I think there's a fundamental change. The fundamental change is that with platform as a service, I don't need to worry about my operating system. But when I move to function as a service, it's actually writing my code in a different way. It's writing my code, breaking my code into tiny components, being able to write a single component that is connected to its own data source and provide that as service. And it's mainly turning our code into a better form of Lego parts that other engineers can use. In many, many companies, when I've seen usage of microservices, it changed the paradigm of how you connect between services. So each team has a service, they own their own API, and through an API gateway, they communicate with each other. So it's a much more decoupled developer experience once you move to functions as a service and microservices.
Do you think this is a continuation of a trend we've been seeing for a while? You think this has the further granularity, kind of the further breakdown from microservices into functions? Is that something that's going to change again how how developers work, how organization work, or is this just more of the same?
Oh, I see that in the Valley all the time. So once you have this notion of a function that provides other developers with a functionality within an organization, you can actually break the software that you want to build into granular components and have each team own their own isolated functionality. And then you can have composition, which is much more manageable, where you can, like, each team provides a certain functionality, like identity, like logging, like multiple functionality within the big organization, and you can reuse a lot of the other functionality out there.
So more use, more scale at the developer organization.
Exactly.
Thanks. Moving back to investment and to the investor perspective. David, you made a number of, as a fund, you've made a number of investment into serverless space. I think serverless.com may have been the first one, or we've been the first one. I don't remember which one. Which one was the first one?
Binaris. I think we closed the Binaris deal before we closed the serverless.com deal.
So we're the first?
Yeah, you're the first.
And since then, you've invested in Hexagon. What?
Hexagon here in Israel, yeah.
What draws you to the space? What do you see in serverless? Why so many investment in this space?
Yeah, so Lightspeed is extremely strong on enterprise IT, and we try to identify investment themes in advance. So we did it with storage and flash storage. We identified this trend at the beginning of like 2004, and we started to invest really early in this space and made tremendous investments and huge returns. You know, maybe you know about Nutanix and Pliant and Nimble and Fusion.io and Extreme.io here in Israel. So for us, it's really important to be exposed to the areas where we think will be most attractive in coming years. So we did the work, and we have strong belief that serverless is one of the leading trends that we're going to see in the future of enterprise IT. And you know, to tell it in a very simple manner, you know, the idea is that enterprise IT is moving to the cloud and cloud compute is moving to serverless. That's the theme here. And we think that there are good arguments why serverless is the future, and I'm not talking about cost savings. We think that the main advantage is basically it enables businesses to be more competitive. It increases the efficiency and the productivity of developers, brings more agility to the business, short-term time to market. So there are several advantages. None of them is related directly to cost savings, although we believe that cost savings will also be there down the road. We're not sure that today serverless is indeed cheaper than other alternatives. So we built a team around serverless. We're two partners in Israel who are mainly focusing on serverless investments, early stage, obviously, because all investments in this space are early stage. And the same with the US. We have 2-3 partners in the US who are also looking actively on almost all serverless opportunities. So we think, you know, from our perspective, again, this is one of the most promising area for investments in the future.
Sounds good for us. I think that's a good opportunity to kind of move the ball in this direction. If anyone has questions, you want to ask us anything. Can be about investment, can be about entrepreneurship, can be about serverless. So question was, we're seeing maybe the periphery of application, some automation and scripting moving over to serverless and not the core of the applications. And I don't know if someone solicited this question because this is directly what Binaris is all about. We're actually about enabling core application workloads to transition to serverless. There's a number of barriers. I don't want to turn this into a pitch, but there's a number of barriers. Lambda and Lambda-like platform were never designed to run your core application. they have a number of features, and their design point is designed around tying together existing services, which is why it's a great solution for ETL, which is why it's a great solution for cloud automation. The level of integration that Lambda has into AWS services is unprecedented. I've never seen any other product at this scale that has this level of smooth integration with other services. And this is really, I'm bowing my head to the Lambda team for that. But Lambda was never designed to run your core application workload, and because of that, it's way too slow for core application. Same service running on EC2 will give you about 10x, 20x performance, better performance than Lambda functions. It's a lot more expensive. We like to give the kind of car analogy. If you think about owning a car is owning your server, leasing a car is maybe a VM, renting a car is a container, and Uber is serverless. Basically, Uber is plagued by the two main problems that Lambda faces. One is that getting an Uber takes a lot of time, sometimes an unpredictable time, so that's the latency, the performance part. And if you would use Uber on a daily basis for all your rides, it would be very expensive. So that's kind of the situation with Lambda. And those are two core fundamental things to the architecture, the underlying architecture of Lambda that prevent it from becoming a back or a platform for running the actual application or the core application backend. And that's what we're targeting as a company. I don't know if you have other answers to that.
I totally agree with your observation. That's the status of serverless and Lambda today. However, we see that more and more logic is moving into serverless, and it makes sense. And our vision is that eventually you're going to see many new, mainly cloud-native applications that are built specifically for serverless or Lambda, and are using most of their codes. The code is Lambda-based.
Perhaps a little bit out of the scope of this conference, but for David, what are the previous, I'd call it trends or umbrella terms? Like serverless is like an umbrella term for a set of technologies and a set of principles. What are other trends like that, previous ones or current ones that you've sought after and invested in, and how do they work out? I'm specifically interested about if you've got any stories about those kinds of trends that didn't work out.
Yeah, so we do have, let's focus on those that didn't work that well for us. I think that, we were investing heavily in clean tech around 2008 to 2010. We didn't see huge successes around clean tech for us. And by the way, I think that the biggest clean tech success that we had was an Israeli company, SolarEdge, that went public. But this theme didn't prove itself. There was another team back in the early 2000s around Homeland Security. I can say that we're very successful around this theme as well. Other failures. That's what I have on my mind, from top of my mind. Flash storage. That was flash storage. We had, I think, like 6 or 7 huge exits around all of them are early stage investments in this domain, one after another.
I want to add to that. As a person who lives where the buzz is, I freaking hate the buzzwords. I don't think that there's any merit in any technology wave other than the business it provides. So the fact that the world moves in, now serverless, everything is serverless, and everything is AI, everything is AI. No, you need to build a good business and use the technology that each wave provides to see if there's an edge that could make your business better. Like before we had mobile, we couldn't do Uber, right? So with every new interface, with every new technology, what is the business angle? What is the value that we can bring our users that could be utilized by this technology? So this is, I think, what I'm, as entrepreneurs, or as engineers, this is what you need to think about. There's a new thing in town. What are the things that I could do now that I couldn't do before? And if you combine multiple buzzwords, it's not adding value, in my opinion.
I totally agree with Amir.
So in real conferences, you usually have a couple of mics and then people queue up. We thought that that was more for Americans. Israelis don't like queuing up. So we're improvising.
So you hear me? Great. So Itzik from Innovation Endeavors here. I want to ask you all questions regarding the hype cycle and the position of serverless within that hype cycle. I think Jan also shared that in his presentation. So at least in Gartner's eyes, serverless is just before the peak point or the high point, and like we're ahead of this fall. So first of all, whether you agree on this view, and if so, what kind of disappointment will make serverless fall, and if so, what kind of like advantages will make it rise again? So that's your view on the hype cycle and the position.
I don't know where we are at the graph, because if I would know, then that would be, it's your job in Innovation Endeavors to know where you are in the graph, not my job. But what I say is that I think what we'll need to learn as an industry is where serverless works and where it doesn't. So the problem with all these technologies is that you think, I touched about it a little bit in my talk, is like you think that this is an amazing hammer and everything is a nail. So you start to do serverless for everything. And then you find use cases that suck at serverless, and you say, "Oh, it's a bad technology. I'm not going to use it for anything." I think as an industry, we'll learn which are the which are the workloads that work really well in serverless, and that's where we will optimize. Like every technology, it's a matter of like right now, everything is serverless. If you stop anyone in San Francisco and ask them what they're doing, they're probably building a serverless Bitcoin something. But we'll learn about these technologies and what actually works in a couple of years, like with mobile and anything else. When I worked on Android, we didn't know what will be the killer use cases. There was a quote by Eric Schmidt. He said, "I don't know what this technology would be, but I know it will be as big as Uber," the next one.
Do you want to?
No, I agree that, I agree in general with the hype cycle of Gartner, but, for you as potential investor in the technology, I don't think that you should be, afraid of this hype cycle. It's always the case. I think that serverless today is a bit overhyped. It will get on the top of the cycle, go down, but so what? As long as you believe that there are merits for this technology and it makes sense from business perspective to use serverless instead of monolithic applications, that's, from an investor perspective, I think that's all you need to know and make, careful bets in this space.
Maybe just to add a little bit from a provider perspective, we're seeing more and more people subscribe to the serverless model, which basically means I don't want to think about my servers. I want my servers to be someone else's problem, and I only want to pay for what I use. That's how Amazon defines serverless. And then we're seeing more and more developers subscribing to the function-based model. And Lambda and Azure Functions and Google Functions and Binaris, we're all in the intersection of those two trends, and or the two spaces. And when we started out back in 2016, we flew out to Brooklyn to the first serverless conference. There were 250 people, and that was kind of the size of serverless community all over. And we came back and we started talking to people, and we were talking to developers, we were talking to potential customers, we were talking to potential hires, and we were kind of pitching serverless and pitching functions. And today we're going into meetings and we're kind of waving the same flags that people tell us, don't worry about it, we already bought in. More and more people are saying that. So from our perspective, the market is moving, and it's moving very fast. So from the inside out, it feels like maybe it's late in the game, but I think that in terms of real world adoption, we're in a very, very, very beginning of it. And the big guys, the guys who are running most of the cycles, and the small guys, the guys who are writing most of the code and doing most of the innovation, they're just starting to hop on.
Yeah, you were talking about the merits of decoupling and modularity that serverless brings. Yet, one thing that serverless kind of forces us to do is to couple with a provider or with a stack of services from a certain provider. How do you see standardization happening? Like, are we going to see some standardization, or how do you see that evolve?
I can try to take this. At least from my experience, the standardization happens after product market fit. So after you see that, so everybody's trying to innovate, and while they're trying to innovate, they don't have time to standardize. You've seen it on the web, you've seen it in mobile in many, many cases. And once you get to a product market fit, and this is a technology that everybody uses, now they're starting to bitch about standardization, right? So say, oh, this is working, but I want to port to this product or to this product. And then offers come that help you port from one to the other. So once you start to seeing standards, then you know that it will become, there will be a strong product market fit for this.
So let me say something that would be probably not that popular. I think that multi-cloud or being cloud agnostic is a bit overhyped. I think that vendor lock-in is a matter of, how much money you're ready to invest in order to switch between clouds. And the other thing is that, you get tons of benefits from each cloud vendor you work with. So if you really want to be cloud agnostic, you need to basically compromise to the lowest common denominator of each cloud provider. So I think that there is a huge trade-off between, the functionality and agility and performance of your application and your ability to be cloud agnostic. So, it's nice. People are talking about being cloud agnostic or running on multi-clouds transparently. I'm not sure it's that important, and I think that in many cases it doesn't worth the trade-offs.
It doesn't happen in real life. Nobody moves, right? You hear from an account manager that he managed to move someone. They might have moved their CDN or something like that. Nobody actually moves clouds.
Yeah, and people are confused because you see surveys from enterprises and they are talking about running on multi-clouds in parallel, but they are not running the same workloads on different clouds. They are running different workloads in each cloud. So they are talking about multi-cloud. They are not, as Amir said, they are not really using the multi-cloud term as people think about. And again, I think it's a bit overhyped.
I'm going to sit this one out because they already covered all the bases. Any other questions?
I want to know, what do you think about the validity of serverless on-premise? Is it something what makes sense? Or not?
So, for me,
Yeah, go ahead.
So for me, this is a little bit contradiction in terms, because if you buy into the AWS definition of serverless, which means you don't manage your own servers, how can that run on-prem? So I think if the question is serverless per se on-prem, then if you can think about your kind of IT organization as a completely separate organization, and you never think about servers, but the IT organization does, then yes, you can have something like that. I guess your question is probably more about functions on-prem than okay, you're nodding, so I guess this is more the question. I think that one of the benefits of serverless functions is that they create a complete abstraction of the infrastructure. And if we can create an environment that spans multiple tiers, if we can be efficient enough to run functions on an iPhone or an Apple Watch or whatever IoT device you can imagine, and then span on-prem or the edge, and then span over to the public cloud, there's a promise in serverless and functions. This abstraction basically provides a promise where, as we can think about the workload as something that's migratable between multiple tiers, whether it's dynamic migration or just static migration, whereas I, as a developer, can build my code once with functions and then have them span multiple tiers or kind of split between multiple tiers. And of course, the big question in that case would be data. And I think that goes back to the multi-cloud question as well, but how do you kind of manage different data tiers across different client side, cloud side, and maybe something in between, which could be on-prem or could be the edge or whatnot. How do you manage? How do you split data? How do you manage data migration? I think that's the big question when we're coming to think about this multi-tier application, because the promise of serverless and function is creating this abstraction which makes code execution basically agnostic. And of course, providing that you can make functions small enough and compact enough and run them in an efficient enough manner to fit the different tiers.
I'm going to make two predictions, which I don't know if I stand behind, but I'm going to make them anyway. I think I'm absolutely certain that there's going to be on-premise functions, because a lot of enterprises are going to ask for it, so somebody's going to build it, and I think it's a very bad idea. So, when I worked at Slack, there were a lot of enterprises that asked us to do on-premise, and our competition provided it, and it was a sucky idea, and then they moved back to the cloud. So I think one of the big vendors is going to provide an on-premise solution, but it's not going to provide the value that you can actually see.
I totally agree, and let me add, also from business perspective, in my opinion, the opportunity is there, but it's pretty small, because if you look at, the early adopters of serverless, and also, the late adopters will mostly be, the new, innovative, younger, agile companies, and not old companies that are usually the companies that are demanding on-prem solutions. So therefore, I think also from business perspective, if you really want to develop something for serverless, you better focus on cloud companies that are running their workloads in the cloud.
Yeah, we have 2 more minutes. I have one more question that I would like to ask. And that's a question for both of you, basically. And do you think, and how do you think, that serverless affects entrepreneurship? And take that anywhere you want. Which companies are kind of missing in the space? How does building a business in a serverless world is different? And kind of, if you could conclude with what advice would you give entrepreneurs who are looking to innovate in the space?
Everything in 1 minute and 41 seconds, yeah? Yeah. So I only focus on the advice for entrepreneurs. Be open, talk to as many people as you can before you focus on a specific idea. Try to gather as much input from experts in the field. And finally, talk to investors, professional investors, not angels. Talk with us as early as possible. You have multi-shots. People tend to think that you can only approach a VC once you're totally ready. That's not the case. We meet entrepreneurs several times before they focus on a specific idea, and the Hexagon guys here in the crowd can also validate this claim. I think that eventually VC money is cheaper than other sources of money. It's true that you get diluted probably the same amount with other investors, but you simply get more money for the same equity that you provide external new investors. So talk to us as early as possible.
Okay. I'm going to take a totally different angle. Take his money. But when you think about this type of technology, there's 3 angles to think about it. Being core to the technology, like Binaris. So I'm building a serverless, but much better, much faster, much more mission critical. And then the second area is how can I innovate on the technology? How can I use serverless to do something that nobody else can? Or what ideas can I do with this technology? And the last one is picks and shovels. So how can I help serverless developers do better monitoring, do better security? Like I'm wearing a jeans by Levi's, and he made all his money selling jeans to gold diggers, right? And he made a company that lasted forever. So if you look at these type of technologies, there's always core technologies, technologies on top of the new technology, and picks and shovels. Like what are the tools and services that developers will need on this new technology?
Awesome. David, Amir, thank you so much for coming. And thank you all for sharing this day with us.